I stood there, frozen, watching the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance bounce off the warehouse walls. The sound of the siren was deafening, but it couldn't drown out the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. I watched as the paramedics loaded the stretcher into the back of the rig. The guy on the stretcher was gasping, clawing at his throat, his face a color of red I didn't think was humanly possible. I knew exactly what happened. I knew exactly why he was dying. And the scariest part? I was the one who did it. My little prank just turned into a potential homicide investigation. All because of a sandwich. Well, actually, it was fajitas, but we'll get to that. Before we dive into how I almost became a murderer over lunch, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us find more stories like this to share with you. Also, just a heads up. This is a true story from Reddit, rewritten and dramatized for your entertainment. Now, let's go back to where it all started. 3 years ago, I was working at a massive manufacturing plant in the Midwest. If you've never worked in a factory, let me paint a picture for you. It's loud, it's hot, and it smells like burning rubber and despair. The place was huge, employing hundreds of people across 3 different shifts. But here's the kicker. They didn't hire directly. They used 5 different temp agencies to staff the floor. That meant the workforce was a revolving door. New faces every single day. People would show up for a shift, realize the work was brutal, and vanish by lunch break. You stopped bothering to learn names because chances are that guy named Steve wouldn't be there tomorrow. It was chaotic. It was impersonal, and it was the perfect breeding ground for a thief. I was working 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Let that sink in for a second. 12 hours on your feet, lifting heavy metal parts, sweating through your shirt within the first hour. When you work like that, your life revolves around one thing: lunch. That 30-minute break is sacred. It's the only time you get to sit down. The only time you get to silence the ringing in your ears. And most importantly, it's the only fuel you have to survive the next 6 hours of hell. I'm a guy who takes his food seriously. I don't do soggy sandwiches or cup noodles. I meal prep. I spend my Sunday nights cooking gourmet meals because that lunch break is the highlight of my day. It was the only thing keeping me sane. Then, the nightmare began. It was a Tuesday. I had packed a leftover lasagna, homemade sauce, 3 types of cheese, the works. I had been thinking about that lasagna since 8 a.m. My stomach was growling so loud I could hear it over the machinery. The whistle blew for lunch. I rushed to the break room, opened the communal fridge, and reached for my blue Tupperware. It wasn't there. I paused. Maybe I moved it? I checked the shelf below. Nothing. I checked the freezer. Maybe I put it there by mistake? Nothing. I looked around the break room. Dozens of strangers were eating, laughing, staring at their phones. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Someone had taken it. I didn't eat that day. I spent the next 6 hours dizzy with hunger, fueled only by rage and vending machine coffee. I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe someone had the same blue container. Accidents happen, right? Wednesday came. I brought BBQ pulled pork sliders. Lunchtime rolled around, gone. Thursday, chicken Alfredo, gone. Friday, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, vanished. By the end of the week, I wasn't just hungry, I was homicidal. We are talking about 6 12-hour shifts with 0 calories in the middle of the day. I was weak. I was irritable. I started looking at everyone with suspicion. Was it that new guy from the temp agency? Was it the supervisor with the grease stain on his shirt? Was it the nice old lady from HR? Every time I saw someone chewing, I wanted to grab them and interrogate them. Is that my food? Does it taste like my hard work? The frustration spawned evil thoughts. I fantasized about putting laxatives in the food. maybe some blue dye so I could catch them red-handed, literally. But I needed something faster, something immediate, something that would send a message so loud that nobody would ever touch a lunchbox in this factory again. I decided on the nuclear option. I needed heat. Not just Tabasco sauce heat, not jalapeno heat. I needed weapon-grade spice. I went to the store and bought the hottest peppers I could find. The Carolina Reaper. If you don't know what a Carolina Reaper is, let me educate you. A jalapeno is about 5,000 Scoville heat units. A habanero, which is pretty hot, is about 300,000. The Carolina Reaper? It clocks in at over 2 million Scoville units. This isn't food. It's a chemical weapon. It's the kind of heat that doesn't just burn your tongue, it burns your soul. I went home that night with a plan. I was going to make the most delicious-looking lethal trap in history. I decided on steak fajitas. I bought a beautiful cut of skirt steak. I marinated it in lime, cumin, and garlic. I seared it to perfection on a cast-iron skillet. The smell was intoxicating. It looked like a meal fit for a king. But then came the secret ingredient. I put on a pair of rubber gloves. I wasn't taking any chances touching these peppers with my bare skin. I took the Carolina Reapers and I minced them. I chopped them so fine they were almost invisible. I mixed them into a fresh pico de gallo salsa. Tomatoes, onions, cilantro, lime juice, and pure fire. I loaded the fajitas. I spread that demon salsa generously over the steak. Then, I topped it with more cheese and cilantro to hide the danger. I placed it carefully into my Tupperware. I polished the clear lid until it sparkled. I wanted the thief to see it. I wanted them to covet it. I wanted them to look at that meal and think jackpot. I went to sleep that night with a smile on my face. I slept like a baby. The next morning, I walked into the factory with a purpose. I clocked in. I walked straight to the break room. There were a few people in there getting coffee. I acted casual. I placed the trap on the center shelf of the fridge, right at eye level. It was bait. Beautiful, deadly bait. Then I went to my station and waited. The morning dragged on. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept checking the clock. 9 a.m., 10 a.m. My stomach wasn't even growling today. I was fed by the anticipation of justice. I wondered who it would be. Would they run to the water fountain? Would they scream? Would they just sweat profusely? I played out a dozen scenarios in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. It was around 11 a.m., 1 hour before the official lunch break. I was working on the assembly line, tightening bolts on a chassis. Suddenly I heard it, a scream. Not a ha-ha funny scream. A primal, terrified scream for help. It was coming from the break room down the hall. Then, commotion. People were running. Help! Someone call 911! My heart dropped. I dropped my wrench and ran toward the noise. I pushed through the crowd gathering at the break room door. And there he was, the lunchbox bandit. It wasn't some random temp worker. It wasn't a scrawny kid. Lying on the dirty linoleum floor was one of the floor managers. Let's call him Gary. Gary was a big guy, a bully. The kind of guy who yelled at you for taking a bathroom break that was 30 seconds too long. But right now, Gary didn't look tough. Gary looked like he was dying. He was clutching his throat with both hands. His eyes were bulging out of his head. His face was a deep shade of purple. He was gasping for air, making these horrible wheezing sounds. Next to him, on the table, was my open Tupperware container. One bite. He had taken one massive bite of the fajita, and that one bite was shutting his body down. "He can't breathe!" someone yelled. "Does he have an EpiPen?" I stood there, paralyzed. The Carolina Reaper peppers, they are strong, yes. But this reaction, this was extreme. Then it hit me. Asthma. The intense shock of the spice, the coughing fit, the panic. It had triggered a massive asthma attack. Gary wasn't just burning. His airways were closing up. I watched as he thrashed on the floor, foaming slightly at the mouth. The heat was probably making it feel like he was inhaling lava, and his lungs were refusing to work. I felt a wave of nausea. I wanted to teach a thief a lesson. I didn't want to kill a man. I thought about stepping forward. I thought about saying, "It's peppers. It's just peppers." But what good would that do? If I admitted it was a trap and he died, that's manslaughter. That's premeditated. So I did the only thing I could do. I stayed silent. I blended into the crowd of horrified onlookers. The paramedics arrived 5 minutes later. It felt like 5 years. They put an oxygen mask on him. They loaded him onto the gurney. I watched them wheel him past me. Gary looked at the ceiling, tears streaming down his face, completely defeated. As the ambulance doors closed, the break room fell silent. Everyone looked at the open container of fajitas on the table. They didn't know it was poisoned. They just knew that Gary ate it, and 5 minutes later, he was almost dead. Someone whispered, "Maybe he choked? Maybe it was an allergy." I quietly walked over to the table. My hands were shaking. I put the lid back on the Tupperware, I picked it up, and I walked out of the break room. I threw the fajitas into the dumpster outside the loading dock, buried them deep under bags of trash, destroyed the evidence. Gary survived. I found out later from the gossip mill, he spent 2 days in the hospital. Doctors said it was a severe respiratory reaction triggered by an irritant. He never came back to work at the factory. I don't know if he quit out of embarrassment or if he was fired for stealing. But here is the thing. He never said a word. He never accused anyone. Because to accuse me, he would have to admit he was stealing my lunch. He would have to admit that a grown man, a manager, was swooping into the fridge and eating a temp worker's food. So he kept his mouth shut. And so did I. Until now. The theft stopped immediately. Not just for me, but for everyone. The legend of what happened to Gary spread. People didn't know the details. They just knew that stealing lunch in this factory was bad luck. Cursed. I continued working there for another 6 months. Every day I put my lunch in the fridge. Every day I opened it at noon, and it was exactly where I left it. Sometimes I look back at that day. I think about the heat of those peppers. I think about Gary on the floor. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was arguably psychotic. But then I remember the feeling of starving for 6 days straight while doing manual labor. I remember the disrespect. And I take a bite of my sandwich and it tastes like victory. So here is my question for you guys. Was I wrong? I mean, technically I laid a trap that put a man in the hospital. But he was the one who decided to steal property that wasn't his and put it in his mouth. If you break into a house and trip over a toy and break your leg, is it the homeowner's fault? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did Gary get what he deserved? Or am I a psychopath who needs to be locked up? Drop a comment. I read all of them. And if you enjoyed this story of spicy justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have plenty more stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and remember, don't touch another man's lunch. See you in the next video.